The certified letter sat on my mahogany kitchen table, looking more like a death warrant than a piece of mail. Sunset Hills Homeowners Association, gold-embossed lettering, heavy, expensive cardstock. I didn't even need to open it to know Sophia Blackstone's fingerprints were all over it. I took a slow sip of my coffee, feeling the 71-year-old ache in my joints, and finally slid a letter opener through the envelope. My blood pressure didn't spike. I'm too old for that kind of drama, but I did feel a cold, sharp clarity wash over me. $250,000. The HOA was fining me $250,000 for historical property violations. They claimed my fence, my chicken coop, my vegetable garden, and the gazebo my late wife, Jane, had loved so dearly were all encroaching on community green space. They weren't just asking me to move a fence, they were trying to bankrupt me out of the home I'd lived in for 30 years. I looked out the window at the 5 sprawling mansions that had sprouted up around my modest 8 acres back in 2005. These million-dollar homes, with their infinity pools and tennis courts, had always looked down on my little farmhouse. Now, it seemed, they wanted to erase it entirely. "Morning, Walter, bringing good news," Betty Harris called out from across the street. She was a good soul, one of the few who remembered when this place was all dirt and dreams. "Just the usual, Betty," I replied with a tight smile, "just a little light reading." I wasn't about to tell her that Sophia Blackstone, the HOA president and resident queen of the neighborhood, had just declared war, but I didn't spend 45 years in heavy construction and land surveying without learning how to handle a bully. Sophia thought she was dealing with a senile old man. She was about to find out she had picked a fight with the one person who knew exactly where the bodies and the property stakes were buried. Within 2 hours of that letter arriving, I heard the unmistakable click-clack of designer heels on my gravel driveway. I stepped onto the porch, leaning against the railing with a calculated indifference. Sophia Blackstone was marching toward me, flanked by 2 other board members like she was leading a royal procession. She held a clipboard like a scepter. Her outfit probably cost more than my annual Social Security, and her expression was one of pure, unadulterated disdain. "Mr. Harrison," she said, skipping the pleasantries, "I'm here to document these violations personally before we proceed with the lien on your property. Your stubbornness is officially costing the community money." She began walking the perimeter of my yard, pointing her manicured finger at my fence. "Illegal, that shed, unauthorized, and this garden. It's an eyesore encroaching on the Sunset Hills preserved wetlands." I let out a short, dry chuckle. "Sophia, that garden has been there since before you moved here from whatever city you fled. And that fence, my father built that in 1973. She didn't even look at me. "Those old papers are irrelevant. We have modern surveys from 2010 showing the community boundaries. You are trespassing on HOA land, Walter. You have 30 days to clear the structures and pay the fine, or we will force a sale." She smiled then, a cold, practiced thing that didn't reach her eyes. She thought she'd already won. That night I went into the garage and pulled the tarp off my old gear. My GPS base station, my total station, and my old metal detector. If Sophia wanted to talk about modern surveys, we were going to talk in a language she didn't understand, data. I spent the evening doing a preliminary sweep. As a retired surveyor, I knew that property lines don't just shift because a developer wants them to. When I found the first original iron stake buried 2 feet under a layer of Sophia's imported mulch, I realized the situation was far worse than I thought. Actually, it was far better, for me at least. My fence wasn't in the wrong place. If anything, it was set back too far. According to the original 1973 deed, my property line didn't stop at the fence. It extended nearly 75 feet into what was now Sophia's backyard. I looked over at her infinity pool and the sprawling tennis court. I looked at Nathan Cross's 4-car garage and Elena Foster's master bedroom wing. I felt a slow, sarcastic grin spread across my face. "Oh, Sophia," I whispered into the dark, "you really should have checked the maths." The next morning, I called Jake Miller. Jake was the best independent surveyor in the state, a man whose word was law in the local courts. "Walter," Jake's voice was gravelly, "I haven't heard from you since you retired. What's up?" "I need a comprehensive boundary survey, Jake. The whole 8 acres. GPS, ground-penetrating radar, the works. I've got some neighbors who are very concerned about property lines, and I'd hate to disappoint them." Jake arrived 2 days later. For 3 weeks we worked the land. We weren't just measuring, we were performing an autopsy on a decade-old fraud. Sophia was frantic. She'd come out to her balcony every morning, clutching a silk robe and a cell phone, watching us work. One afternoon, she finally broke. She marched over to the property line, or what she thought was the property line. "What is this?" she hissed at Jake. "Who authorized this? I'll have your license." Jake didn't even look up from his tripod. He just pointed to the state seal on his vest. "I'm a licensed surveyor, ma'am. Mr. Harrison is the client. If you have a problem, you can talk to the county recorder." Her face went from pale to a deep, blotchy red. She knew, somewhere in that cold, calculating heart, she knew the 2010 survey she'd been using to bully me was a total fabrication. By the end of week 3, Jake handed me a 40-page report. It was a masterpiece. "Walter," Jake said, wiping sweat from his brow, "in 20 years I've never seen anything like this. This wasn't a mistake. The developer who built these mansions deliberately moved the markers to fit those houses on the lots. They stole nearly 2 acres of your land to make those luxury footprints work." The findings were staggering. Sophia's pool and tennis court, 100% on my land. Nathan Cross's garage and driveway, my land. Elena Foster's $500,000 bedroom wing, sits right across the true boundary. Total encroachment value, over $2.5 million in structures. I took the report to my attorney, Jane Mitchell. She was a shark who specialized in property disputes. When she saw the data, she actually laughed. "Walter, they didn't just poke the bear," she said. "They tried to skin it while it was awake. That 2010 survey the HOA sent you. I checked the company. They went out of business in 2008. The document is a forgery." While Jane prepared the legal nuclear option, Sophia tried one last desperate move. She showed up at my door, alone this time, holding a cashier's check for $50,000. "Walter," she said, her voice dripping with fake empathy, "we've been neighbors for a long time. I realized the fine was excessive. Let's just settle this. Take this, keep your fence where it is, and we'll forget the whole thing." I looked at the check, then I looked at her. I didn't get angry. I didn't raise my voice. I just leaned against the doorframe and gave her a small, pitying smile. "Sophia, I don't take bribes from people who are currently trespassing on my property," I said calmly. "And honestly, 50 grand won't even cover the demolition costs for your pool." The blood drained from her face. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that your infinity pool is sitting in my vegetable garden, or it will be once I have it filled in. Have a nice evening." I shut the door before she could scream. The final showdown happened at the emergency HOA meeting 2 weeks later. The room was packed with wealthy homeowners, all of them looking at me like I was a virus in their perfect community. Sophia stood at the podium, her hands shaking slightly. "We are here to discuss the persistent violations and legal threats from the Harrison property. Mr. Harrison has refused to comply with community standards." "Actually," Jane Mitchell stood up, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "We are here to discuss the fact that the Sunset Hills HOA is currently presiding over a massive, multi-million-dollar land theft." She began handing out copies of Jake's certified survey and my 1973 deed. "According to the state and the county recorder," Jane continued, "Mr. Harrison owns approximately 30% of the land your houses are currently sitting on. The 2010 survey you've been using is a forged document. Not only is the $250,000 fine null and void, but my client is now filing for immediate quiet title action." The silence in the room was deafening. You could hear a pin drop, or perhaps the sound of 5 property values hitting the floor. "What does that mean?" Nathan Cross stammered, his face turning grey. "It means," I said, speaking up for the first time, "that you have 2 choices. You can either pay me the full market value for the land you stole, which at current rates is about triple what you think it is, plus 15 years of back rent and property taxes. Or—" I paused, letting the silence hang. I looked Sophia right in the eyes. "Or you can get your bulldozers ready, because I've always wanted a larger garden, and your pool is right where my prize-winning tomatoes belong." The fallout was spectacular. The HOA board dissolved within 48 hours. Sophia Blackstone tried to sue the original developer, only to find out they'd filed for bankruptcy years ago. She ended up having to sell her mansion at a massive loss just to settle the land debt she owed me. The other 4 neighbors, they're currently paying me a monthly land lease that effectively funds my retirement 10 times over. They're very polite to me now. They wave, they ask how my chickens are doing. They never mention the community standards anymore. Sometimes, I sit in Jane's old gazebo with a glass of lemonade, watching the sun set over the property lines that everyone now knows are exactly where they're supposed to be. People think because you're old, you've forgotten how to fight. They think because you're quiet, you're weak. But if there's one thing 45 years in construction taught me, it's this: you have to have a solid foundation. And mine is made of iron stakes and legal truth. The HOA thought they could take my home. Instead, I ended up owning a piece of theirs. And honestly, that's the most satisfying harvest I've ever had. I wonder if Sophia's new apartment has a pool. I doubt it, but if she ever needs a place to swim, she's welcome to come by. I'll let her use the one on my land, for a small fee, of course.